Always helps to take off the lens cover.
Hello everybody and welcome to Working Title Productions. My name is Ben. Today I have a very special video for you. If you can't tell already, I'm a very big fan of Batman and I love Superman. Like a lot. This is just the stuff that I found lying around. And finally, after years of waiting, we finally have Batman v Superman. And man, was it disappointing. Even for me, who enjoyed the film more than most, I can't help but feel let down by what I ended up seeing. In fact, the more I think about it, the more frustrated I am with what the film got wrong. Everything from technical basics of filmmaking all the way down to the fundamental elements of these characters was wrong. So, with the release of the Ultimate Cut Blu-ray right around the corner, promising to fix some of the problems this movie had, I thought I would address some of the big issues I had with Batman v Superman and what I would do to fix them. Let it be known that there are major spoilers ahead. You have been warned. While there was nothing drastically wrong with the art direction in this movie, there were times where I feel like it went a little too dark, even with the established tone of the universe. ZACK SNYDER starts with a perfect reflection of the depiction of both Batman and Superman's environments from the comics. Gotham is introduced with thin white text on a black background, and Metropolis is introduced using black text on a white background. The two contrast each other beautifully, and it feels like they took inspiration straight out of the comics. From there, it goes downhill. Everything is either shot at night or on an overcast day. And that's okay for the most part. Batman is a character who lives in the night. But even Metropolis shots in the middle of the day feel dark. A good example would be when Wallace Keefe is visiting Ground Zero from destruction of Metropolis in Man of Steel. He goes to spray paint onto the statue of Superman, and the entire sky surrounding the park is cloudy and murky. I understand that this is a serious moment in the film, but we are in Metropolis. Put the dark clouds behind Wallace in the close-ups, not over the entire scene. Feel like I'm nitpicking? Don't worry, these issues get progressively more significant. There are quite a few stories being told in Batman v Superman, which makes a lot of turning cogs to bring the story as a whole into fruition. But one story that I feel is entirely unnecessary to the plot is the prototype bullet conspiracy that's being investigated by Lois Lane. Here's a quick recap of the story. Lois Lane is in the desert investigating a story. Shit hits the fan when a CIA agent is exposed in Lois's contingent. Oh yeah, that CIA agent is totally Jimmy Olsen. Yeah, not an issue with the film, but that's going to piss off quite a few fans, and I feel like it did. Bullets fly and one gets lodged in Lois's diary. When she somehow gets that diary back and brings it with her through customs, she goes on a manhunt finding the origins of the bullet to redeem Superman's image. In the end, she never publishes the story, she just gets kidnapped by Lex Luthor when he realizes she has exposed him. Except that isn't why he kidnaps her. He does that to get Superman's attention and have an audience with him for the final act. This makes the entire bullet storyline unnecessary and ridiculously convoluted if they wanted Luthor to use the bullet to get Lois to find him. The film shows that Luthor already knows that Clark Kent is Superman, or at least confirms it in the opening desert sequence. So having Lois chase the origins of the bullet throughout the movie only serves to give her something to do. If you cut this subplot out, Luthor still kidnaps Lois to get Superman's attention, and the final act goes on unchanged. Use that valuable screen time to flesh out your characters a little more. If you just give it to Lois Lane, have her supporting Superman as the world turns against him. So, you want to cast Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. It's a little unconventional, but I don't really mind it. No one wants to be told the same story twice. Oh, he's going to base his character on what he already did in The Social Network? Well, okay, that can work, just don't stray too far. What happens? They stray too far. I would have been okay with Eisenberg basing Luthor off of his depiction of Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network. Just adjust the age of the character for the aging Eisenberg himself has done, and you have a fairly appropriate adaptation. Luthor is a more confident, slightly more arrogant Mark Zuckerberg. Except he isn't. Not in this film, anyway. If that appropriation of the character wasn't a weird choice already, it isn't even realised. Luthor is instead a more awkward and brattish version of Mark Zuckerberg from The Social Network, a far cry away from the confident and calm Luthor we see in the comics, who only shows instability in his most direct confrontations with Superman. There are times where the character goes completely over the top as well, such as when he is doing his dodgy deals to get access to the Kryptonian ship and Zod's body, and he shoves a sweet straight into the guy's mouth. As if anyone would let that happen in real life. It really says something when this Lex Luthor is less cartoony than this Lex Luthor. Between Eisenberg, the script, and Zack Snyder, I'm not really sure who to blame yet. But either way, it is a point of contention which creates some really jarring moments within the film. It's not that hard, guys. A slightly older and wiser Mark Zuckerberg, whose hatred of Superman simmers under the surface. The death of Superman is one of the most iconic storylines of all of comic books, and stands alone as the best-selling one too. It sent ripples across the DC universe and had fans in complete disbelief. The most powerful man in all of comics had finally met his end. Fellow superheroes mourned, readers mourned in real life. It's an obvious choice to bring into the extended universe to have an impact on the wider movie-going audience. But the issue is that everything that made that event so powerful in the comics is absent in the movie. In the comic, Superman is a founding and lasting member of the Justice League, is seen as the guardian angel of Metropolis, and when he died, everyone thought he was going to stay dead. He was well and truly out of the game for a very long time, and when he finally came back, his return was lengthy and full of setbacks. Compare this to what we see in Batman v Superman. The Justice League has not been formed, so while Superman has left an impact, it is not the monumental whole that would be realised if the Justice League had already seen him leading from the front. He isn't entirely trusted by the people of Metropolis either, so his public ceremony isn't held out of love, it's held out of respect and honour. But these aren't necessarily bad things, they are just different to the comics. Their impact isn't as profound, but it is different and interesting. The real issue is the last point that makes the comics so great. No one knew Superman was coming back. This gave the death of Superman the gravity it needed. In the movie, most people know that Superman is coming back, even if they haven't read the comic. It's just good business sense to bring Superman back for more movies. Casual movie fans will assume he is coming back for Justice League, and hardcore fans know it. Like it or not, Man of Steel happened, and it happened in the same universe as Batman v Superman. The ending wherein Superman accidentally destroys half of Metropolis and decides to snap Zod's neck might have been extremely controversial and left a lot of people with a bitter taste in their mouths, but it worked. If you don't believe it worked, Max Landis did a video addressing it, so I'm not going to cover it here. I'll leave a link in the description, you can watch it later. But that controversial ending worked. It had people buzzing about Man of Steel. They say no publicity is bad publicity after all. But this meant that there was huge potential in Batman v Superman to utilise that controversy, depict the public and especially Batman as having distrust towards Superman, had them angry at him for all the destruction and damage that he caused in Man of Steel, acknowledge the bitter taste that this has left behind in some of the citizens of Metropolis as well as the audience of the franchise. That courthouse scene in Batman v Superman shouldn't have been about Superman's random appearance in the desert of a foreign land and the death of villagers, which were clearly killed by guns, not Superman, just saying. It should have been Superman answering for his mistakes in Man of Steel, confronting his critics head on, and it shouldn't end there. The only reason people defend the death of Zod in Man of Steel is because it can be used to help Superman grow as a person and understand the consequences of taking a life when having his power could make it so easy. Superman needs to carry that guilt with him. He may have helped the military plan the use of the Phantom Zone to stop the Kryptonians, but he was removed from the situation. They were already gone when he fights Zod, so when he kills him with his bare hands, he well and truly seals his fate as the last son of Krypton. And when I say he should feel the guilt, I don't mean he tells Lois how the ghost of Zod haunts him and he goes moping around. I mean you see it in his actions. If the courtroom asks him about Zod's death, his confidence and charisma should weigh it slightly to his side of vulnerability. The only connection this film has to Man of Steel is that it happens to have the same cast, and Batman is introduced on Metropolis D-Day. The only story element that carries over is that people know Superman exists. Instead of using elements from Man of Steel to help transition over to this new story, Batman v Superman tries to build the whole world again, which ultimately leads to... The reason Batman fights Superman in this film is because he believes that there is a slight chance that Superman will turn evil and enslave the world, which is possibly the worst case of paranoia I have ever seen. Conversely, Superman only fights Batman because he is literally forced into it by Lex Luthor to keep his mum alive, and Lex is only forcing Superman to fight Batman because it creates an ultimatum wherein the world will see Superman the way he does to resolve his daddy issues. I think. Not only are these motivations paper thin, leaving us with no emotional attachment when they finally throw down, but it is full of plot holes and assumptions that are, as the title of the issue suggests, needlessly complicated. For example, having these issues as the motivation for Batman and Superman to fight requires Lex Luthor to know who both of them are, meaning that in future films, if Lex is out, then there is no good reason for the identities of Supes and Bats not to be out either. There is also the courthouse drama that comes as a result of the opening desert sequence instead of bouncing off Man of Steel, the fact that Batman knows the White Portuguese exists before Lex ever loads kryptonite onto the boat, and the fact that if Superman had just kept his cool a little longer, he could have explained the whole situation to Batman and avoided the whole fight, maybe even stopping Luthor before Doomsday is finished. It would have been far easier and more interesting to focus on the two characters' conflicting ideologies. Batman should fight Superman because he doesn't trust anyone, and he believes that Superman is too dangerous to be left alive, not because Lex Luthor butted up his overbearing sense of responsibility to those under his name. Superman should fight Batman because he sees him as both one of the criminals and a public menace, not because Lex Luthor is bending his arm behind his back and bullying him into doing it. Probably the most agonizing thing about this is that the film actually teases at these motivations and then never uses them. But as terrible as it is to see the most crucial part of this film be done wrong, it pales in comparison to the final two issues, which will undeniably leave hardcore comic book fans really annoyed. Batman is the ultimate testament to the limits of the human race. He is constantly changing what a man can do and distinguishes the line between the possible and the impossible. He is the pinnacle of physical strength, but more importantly, he is the morally incorruptible. We see this demonstrated perfectly in both Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight and the excellent animated film/comic storyline Under the Red Hood. Even when faced with the opportunity to either kill or let the Joker, his arch-nemesis, die, Batman chooses to let him live. He won't allow himself to cross that final barrier between vigilante and criminal. Not because it would be too hard to take a life, or because it's illegal, but because...
it'd be too damned easy.
On top of this, he is supposed to be one of the smartest and most well-reserved men in the DC universe, and yet somehow Lex Luthor is able to determine his secret identity and manipulate him into fighting Superman. Why is this Batman so easily fooled? Why is he killing 9 out of 10 guys that he fights in this movie? I know that he technically killed Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight, but in that film, he had already been shot at and made a desperate final lunge to save Commissioner Gordon's son, not directly attack Harvey Dent. In Batman v Superman, he just drags cars full of people along behind him and flips them onto whatever barrier he can find to explode them. I'm not saying that Batman can't kill at all, but if he's going to be so brutal, then you absolutely cannot have Superman killing people. What the fuck is going on here? Why is the man from Uncle impersonating Superman and running around and tarnishing his public image? Why is the brightest, most positive of all superheroes, a man who from his first outing in Man of Steel should be hopeful and optimistic, instead depressing, mopey, and murdering people he could easily stop by any other means? Why? As mentioned previously, the setup was there for Superman to grow as a person and be determined to save as many people as possible. But he doesn't! I originally had a much larger and angrier rant about what's so wrong with Superman in this movie, but another YouTuber by the name of Mr. Sunday Movies has already done a video that I feel perfectly captures what's wrong with the character. And that's really it. Thank you so much for listening to my random, slightly angry rant on what I found to be wrong with Batman v Superman. Do you think that the Ultimate Cut will fix some, if not all, of the issues that I had with the film? Are there issues that you had that I hadn't talked about yet? Did you like my pitch for Batman v Superman? Comment down below, let me know what you thought. I'm not above any of you. I'm just a guy standing in front of a white sheet. Please click the subscribe button to check out our YouTube page if you enjoyed what you saw here. You can also check out our Twitter and our Facebook page. And until next time, have a good one, guys. I'll see you next time.